so right now the hope is to write four modules: one on freedom of expression, second on freedom of religion, then association, and assembly. So those are the four fundamental charter rights outlined in Section 2 of the Charter.
Welcome to Episode 7 in the second season of Justice Center Weekly, a podcast from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I'm your host, Kevin Steele, and with us today is the Justice Center's Education Programs Coordinator, Ben Klassen. Ben is relatively new to the Justice Center, so in a moment I'm going to ask him to introduce himself to you all. But first, I just want to say a word about one aspect of his duties that I personally believe is worth highlighting. And that is the high school curriculum he's working on that will teach young people about their charter rights and freedoms. It's worth highlighting because this is a real investment in the future for the cause of freedom. And if you are a contributor to the Justice Center, this is one legacy that will go on for a long, long time. Now, we all get caught up in the legal and political fights of the day, and that's okay. But here, with this education program being developed by the Justice Center, we are all truly looking over the horizon to make a better world. But back to the here and now. Ben, welcome to the Justice Center. And before we get into the work you're doing, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Kevin. Great to be with you here today. Hey, as you said, my name is Ben. I'm a new hire here at the Justice Center. I'm here because, I've had a long-standing passion for justice, individual rights and freedoms, and so on. And I should say that before I even got into this, I worked in construction for a while. I did a number of different things. Grew up on a farm. Had lots of time to contemplate about a lot of different topics there. But one thing that always stuck with me, it was just, hey, like the value of individual rights and freedoms, personal autonomy, to be able to do, what you want to do with your life. And so in, I think it was 2017, 7 years ago, I actually went on a 6 to 7 months volunteer trip to Europe for a couple of months, and then later on to Egypt and Lebanon. And so that experience was very formative in my life. I got to visit prisons, got to talk to political prisoners, talk to people who were in prisons for very minor things, and they had been there for decades. I got to work with refugees in Lebanon and so on. So that really got me thinking, man, like the importance of good politics, justice, individual rights and freedoms, and so on. So when I came back then, I worked for another year, but then I went back to school, to university, and started studying politics because I just wanted to understand political institutions and so on, and how change is brought about. During my 4-year studies, I of course also worked in politics for a little bit. Was an intern on Parliament Hill in 2022. And so after finishing my studies last year, I decided to, after getting connected with John Carpe, I was eventually brought on, and happy to be here, happy to fight for justice in the form of education. So,
great. Well, let's talk about your job then. Let's talk about that education curriculum that I highlighted at the beginning. You're now writing this. I understand it's been started, but you're working on what now, the second module already?
Yeah, that's right. So the first module on freedom of expression was written last year, and I'm currently writing the second module, which is on freedom of religion. And yeah, you're right. This has been a project that has been talked about for quite some time. Previous people have started it. The current director of communications, Luke Nielsen, he was the one who wrote the module on freedom of expression. But the project was started before him, though. So.
Okay, so what's the target audience here now? What age group are we at? I said high school. I assumed it's grades 10 to 12, or is it younger? I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, so anyone who would read this course would really benefit a lot, I would say, because not only are we delving into the nitty gritty of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and what freedoms it all gives us and so on, but it also explains like the value of individual rights and freedoms and how to think about these things. And so, and we were writing it. You are right. We were writing it for the demographic of ages 10 through 12, but we are
ages
writing
or
it.
Grades? Sorry, ages or grades?
Sorry, grades.
Okay.
Grades, yeah, so grades 10 through 12. But we're writing it in a language that is easy to understand for even younger demographics or older who are in university and let's say they want to find some writing on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, why it's valuable and so on. They might find it useful to understand it better. Yeah, so and even for adults who are looking to get a better understanding for the Charter. So we are aiming for high schoolers, but I think the project has value for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, I've understood that you've shopped it out to others for feedback already, but you're soon to be taking this on the road or stress testing it in a actual high school soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The previous module of freedom of expression has been taught in I believe Bearspaw one high school here in Calgary, with excellent feedback. Parents, kids alike, they loved it. Again, it was taught by the previous education programs coordinator, who's now the director of communications, Luke Nielsen. He did an excellent job of writing the first module, and went in, stress tested. Students loved it. Of course, after teaching it the first time, there's always changes to be made, and that's exactly why we are stress testing it. And now, at the same time, we have sold a lot of copies already, and again with great feedback. But the goal is that we're stress testing it right now, and then be able to edit it as we go, and eventually have a full curriculum on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that is very professionally made. Yeah.
So how are you looking forward to heading into the high schools?
Man, that age demographic is a fun demographic to work with. They have, we were in a conversation earlier, they are the demographic that freedom of speech truly belongs to. I mean, they just spit it out as it comes into their mind, and you can really have some of the best conversations with them, just because like they have thoughts, they just spit it out as it comes in, and then you talk about it and you unpack it and so on. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We already have 15 people signed up, and we're still a month and a half out. About a month out, and last year, in my understanding, we had that amount of students sign up in the last week or so alone. So I think that'll be a pretty big class, and really looking forward to it.
And I understand you're also taking it to some conference or other. This was a homeschooler conference. Are you going to be displaying it there or previewing it there?
Yeah, that's right. So the conference is called AHEA, Alberta Homeschooling Education Association, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Don't quote me on it. But yeah, so it's a huge annual homeschooling association here in Alberta, and parents and educators alike, they get there. It's a conference where, I haven't been there before, so I should probably not speak too much about it. But essentially, in my understanding, it is where parents and educators learn about how to better educate their students, and the value of home education and so on. And so we will be having one of the booths there, advertising it to parents, our curriculum to parents and educators, talking about how we can participate with them and helping to educate their kids on the value of individual freedom. So yeah.
Well, will we be tested on this at the end? That's what I'm wondering. Is it something they're going to get grades on? The kids not the parents at the homeschooling conference.
So are you talking if the kids will get graded on doing the course?
Yeah. Are you
Oh,
going to
okay.
be grading kids?
Yeah, so we are. That's a good question, Kevin. So we are providing it in two different ways. One is anyone can go on our website to just buy the materials and go through it, learn the stuff, and be done with it. On the other side, we also provide a full package where we offer office hours where students can book a time with me, and we talk about the curriculum, the things that they're learning. If they have questions, there's assignments to complete, there's essays to write, and so those essays will be written. And so at the end, they after completing the module and essays are written, handed in on time, and so on, we'll be grading those, and then they'll be receiving a grade at the end. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so looking at the long-term project, how many of these modules are roughly we thinking of producing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are currently in the process of figuring that out exactly what that will look like. Although we do have a pretty good idea. So right now the hope is to write 4 modules: one on freedom of expression, second on freedom of religion, then association, and assembly. So those are the 4 fundamental charter rights outlined in Section 2 of the Charter. And so, of course, there are some other democratic rights. There's mobility rights, there's language rights, minority rights, and so on in the Charter. And those are, of course, also extremely important as well. But what we want to focus on right now is to get something on the road with the 4 fundamental rights and freedoms outlined in the Charter, which, I mean, they are so extremely broad, so extremely important. They are really what builds a democracy, right? Like, it's freedom of speech. Like, you don't have a democracy without freedom of speech. And that includes freedom of the press, freedom of online speech, and so on. And it includes freedom of religion and conscience, which if you can't, and even assembly and association, if you can't assemble with a group of people, either in protest or in churches, and being able to express yourself freely, democracy doesn't really function without that, right? One of the things actually that I like about, or one of the things that we talk about in the module and was talked about in the first module too, is just how through these freedoms we as society can get at the good or the knowledge of truth, and so we explore these freedoms through various different theories. And one of the theories is, and we do that to give students the tools to be able to analyze and not only the values of these rights and freedoms. Okay, why do they exist, and why do we have them? Why should we have them? Should there be any limitations? But also giving them tools to analyze, like, let's say, certain court cases and the rulings that judges made, and so on. And one of the theories is epistemic theory. It's really Mill's theory, which is the theory on, like, how do we arrive at knowledge. And so I really like that because like we talk about just the importance of speech, the importance of religion, the importance of assembly, and so on, in order for us as society to get at the knowledge of the best political order, and many of the other cultural values that we value, right? And so that's really what we're trying to get at with that.
Okay, well, I guess with the pandemic, you don't have to look too far for examples of violations. I'm thinking, prior to the pandemic, you might have had to reach into the past to look for examples of violations, but a lot of this stuff happened in these kids' lifetimes, so they will, I suppose, have some ready memory of it.
Oh yeah, these kids, they come with a passion into the classroom. I mean, they saw the convoy. Some of them, they held the flags in the convoy, and also other things during the pandemic. we could talk about misinformation, disinformation, should that be allowed to be shared, and that's something that we really talked about during the pandemic. Some of these kids are come from Christian households, and so there's an issue pertaining to freedom of religion, like do we have the right to, or freedom of assembly, I guess, do we have the right to continue to assemble, or should the government have the right to shut down churches during, and now of course the government wasn't just targeting churches, but like that, those are all questions that these students, or topics that these students have passionate opinions on. And we are here to talk about them and to ask them for their opinion, but then to also challenge them. We want to create or give them tools to be critical thinkers. That's really the key behind this, right? Like, we want to get at the value of freedom of speech and then help them to critically think through these values and when should limitation ever be justified, if ever, right?
Right, yeah. In terms of religion now, I wanted to ask you how much depth there is, historical depth to what you're compiling or creating there, because of course freedom of religion is kind of fundamental to Canada's creation or its history, because a lot of peoples came here because they were seeking religious freedom. I'm thinking in particular of people out of Europe and Eastern Europe. Do you cover that at all, the history?
Yeah, we do some. For sure, history is very important to be able to teach really anything. We ought to be able to understand where certain rights, our individual rights and freedoms came from, and so on. And yeah, you're right. Like, Canada was built on the value of freedom of religion, and so on. So we will be talking briefly about the Puritans and many other different denominations that moved over to North America in the 1700s. A lot of them, they moved to North America because they were fleeing religious persecution, and so North America was really founded on, both America and Canada, on the value of individual rights and freedoms. So that will be mentioned briefly, not extensively due to space. We don't want to give these kids a master's education here, like it's still a high school education, right? But what we will be more so focusing on is Canada's legal history pertaining to these freedoms. What have the courts, how have the courts typically defined religious freedom and freedom of conscience, and have we always had it? Have we always respected these freedoms? And how did justices argue and reason through these court decisions that they made?
Right. And how about the issues that are staring them in the face, but they may not understand, like the reason for the separate school systems with the Catholic and the public school systems? The creation of that, of course, goes to our rights as well. Is that going to be in there as well?
There will be some of that, some history pertaining to, like how there were, two nation states, the Quebecers, and then the English-speaking people here in Canada, and then the Catholic versus the Protestants, and how freedom of religion came about, or was eventually protected in law here in Canada, and then through the courts as well. But again, we are, as much as when I first outlined my proposal for writing this religious freedom module, and then I went over it with Luke, who wrote the previous module. He was like, "Man, it's such a great outline," and I had a lot of history in it. But he's like, "Man, we don't want to, again, it's not a master's study."
Right.
But really, what we're really trying to get at is this, to teach students the value of individual rights and freedoms, to give them philosophical tools, like certain different theories to think through these freedoms. And that takes a lot of time and space, I guess, because we have to explain these theories, and then we we're going through different cases, court cases, and so on, and analyzing these court cases with these theories. And and so that will be the majority of the module, but there's definitely still some history that will, of course, frame the whole issue. So.
Okay. And just one last question on this topic. How long will you be absconded to the high school? How long does it take to teach one of these modules?
Well, we could take many weeks, but unfortunately we only have 9 weeks, so a lot will be crunched into 9 weeks. So, really looking forward to it. Yeah.
Good. Now, earlier you had mentioned teaching those kids and making them write essays. I want to use that as a bit of a segue into another question about your duties. I understand we have contests at the Justice Center. Nobody really has talked about them on the podcasts a whole lot. Maybe tell us about, for instance, the essay contest that you're running.
Yeah, so the essay contest has been held at the Justice Center for a number of years. It is a contest where we celebrate and encourage academic excellence in students. It's typically from ages 15 through 25. Details are still to be determined this year for this year's contest, which will be announced on April 15 with all the details. And so each contest then has, which is an annual thing, right? We have 3 winners. We have the first winner wins $2,000, the second winner wins $1,500, and then the third wins $500. And then on top of winning the prizes, they also get their essays posted on our website with their name and a photo of them. So there's some publicity to that as well, which is a great thing for someone who's trying to, I guess, build their career and has career aspirations, whatever. But what we're trying to do is gather students or give students an opportunity to contribute to the conversation in Canada around individual rights and freedoms. Last year we had a couple of different questions. One was pertaining to freedom of speech, and then the other one was pertaining to the right to protest. And we had some excellent essays that came through, and the winner was actually a grade 11-year-old student. I can't quite remember now what she wrote on, but she wrote a very fine essay. So many essays came through that were just really, really good. And so that's what we want to do. We want to reach a younger demographic and make them more aware of what the Justice Center is doing and the importance of this work, but then also allow them to contribute to it. And then we announce it in our on our social media platforms or emails who the winners are, and so it's a great exercise for young students to partake in. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now you had mentioned that we're going to put this on our website. I think I want to mention that we just unveiled a new look on our website. That's great. One of the sections in that website is a very extensive section dedicated to the reports that we've done over the years. It's actually quite impressive, the body of work there. Are you working on any of these reports now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. Before I get to that, though, I would like to mention the photography contest, which is a brand new contest for us. And we're super excited for this. So this, like I said, the essay contest has been run for a number of years, but the photography contest is a new contest for us, and we are launching it because we want to reach a different demographic still, where a lot of essay writers they are academics. They enjoy writing, they enjoy researching, and so on. But we also want to reach Canadian creatives, right? So it's the same demographic, that the essay contest will have, but this will be the challenges for them to think, okay, what does freedom look like to you through the lens or through camera, and you capture that, and so again, the details will be announced on April 15th, but this is another really cool contest that we will be launching that will also allow young Canadian creatives to participate in that way. So
Good.
yeah. And with regards to your question, writing reports, yeah, that's part of my job description. I've always enjoyed researching and writing, and now I get to do that as part of my job. Yeah, so it is. These reports and analysis are essentially tools to to educate the public on whatever issue is currently popular. We've written a number of reports in the past on freedom of speech on campus, on digital ID, and so on. The one that I wrote recently that will be published in a couple of weeks is the one on Bill C-18, the Online News Act. So.
Okay, and that's coming out, you say, in a couple of weeks? Going to be on the...
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've been very busy here, and amidst launching a new website and also writing the curriculum, so on. We haven't gotten the chance to actually publish it and make the final edits to it. But yeah, the hope is to publish it within a couple of weeks. I can't really set a deadline or set an exact date on it yet, but yeah, no, it's there's a lot of things that I covered in that report. There's a lot of things to talk about that.
Well, can you give us a coming attractions preview?
Yeah, so Bill C-18, it's very interesting. So it's the Online News Act for anyone who doesn't know, and so yeah, it's a complicated problem. So it started with the news. The news industry in the past was hugely reliant on advertisements, right? So you bought your newspaper, and then on the sides there were tons of advertisements, and then these advertisers would pay the news companies, the news organizations to be able to post their ads on it, and then you would often grab your scissors and cut some of these ads and go to and store, hey, I want this thing, right? However, when the internet came along, and the World Wide Web was introduced in 1989, I believe. And then soon after, social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and so on, then very soon advertisers found a way, or social media platforms found a way to target individuals based on the data that they were collecting. So they were able to advertise very specifically, very targeted to individuals. So now instead of advertisers having to pay to advertise to, like, let's say 5 million people in order to reach 1,000 buyers, they now could advertise to 1 million people or 100,000 people to reach 1,000 buyers. And so now, like, advertising became way more efficient. You got way more bang for your buck, right? And so that's when news organizations started to lose most of their advertisement revenue. People started buying less and less newspapers as well because they just used it on their phones, their apps, and and so then news organizations they struggled for money. They started letting go of journalists, and journalists started working from home, and so on. And eventually it got to the point where news organizations are like, hey, what do we do? Like, they got jealous and envious of the big tech or social media companies and wanted a piece of their pizza, right? And then where this idea of Bill C-18 or the link tax, which in the end it ended up the way the government has chosen to go, it ended up not being a link tax. But the idea came about in Europe, and Germany was the first country to try something like that, where news conglomerates were pressuring the government to put a legislation in place that would allow them to charge social media platforms and news aggregators like Google for them linking, or for them sharing their news on those platforms through links. And what is so interesting about this is that Google and Facebook and all the other social media platforms and news conglomerates, they were providing these services for free. It was a service to the news organization. So the value, the direction of the value flowed in the direction of the news organizations, not the other way around. So, let's picture it like this. A young 12-year-old boy, he's hired on by a small news organization in his hometown, and he gets whatever, $15 an hour or whatever he gets, right? But the boy won't deliver the newspapers unless he's paid for it, right? But now with this bill or with these kinds of legislation, what the government is essentially saying, no, the boy now has to pay the news organization for the privilege of being forced to deliver the news. And so the paper delivery boy was, in this case, social media and Google. And so Google was now supposed to pay news organizations for the privilege of being forced to carry their news to the hundreds of millions of people. And so that's what the dilemma is. And with a bunch of legislation was passed with varying successes in Europe and eventually Australia. And Canada took the Australia model, where the government, Australia was actually the government who was going to be the mediator between news organizations and social media platforms to make sure that they would arrive at a good deal for social media organizations. Canada chose to go a slightly different way, but it was still based on whichever whichever news organization has their content linked on Google and Facebook, that they will be eligible for funding by these companies. And so while it wasn't necessarily directly a per link tax, that was up for debate, up for negotiation between the two. It was still based on whichever organization's news gets linked. And so in that sense, it's still was often referred to as a link tax by experts. And in the end, as we know, that bill caused Meta, Facebook, and Instagram to exit Canada completely with regards to news. You won't find Canadian news anywhere on Meta's programs. And then on Google, Google still stayed, but the government ended up making a $100 million deal where Google was going to be exempt from the legislation by just paying a lump sum of money to the government, who was then going to decide themselves through the CRTC how to give that out to news media. So
I'm looking forward to reading that one. That's for sure. Wow, yeah. It sounds like we're going to keep you pretty busy over your term here at the Justice Center. Thanks a lot, Ben, for joining us and giving us a heads up on what's coming out of the education department of the Justice Center. And really, I hope to speak to you again soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for having me on, and looking forward to the next time.